the main issue when I'm walking around, I know there are so many different issues in government at the moment and in politics and geopolitics, but everyone I speak to, they come up to me and they're concerned. I've never seen people so worried. It is mass immigration, particularly around Islam and Islamism. And I think finally we're allowed to sort of talk about it. There seemed to be a 10-year period where we couldn't, and it was you're racist if you talk about it. What can people do if they, other than vote, what can they do to try and change this and make their country, have some acceptable immigration, but not have it completely changing in the way it is?
So they do need to vote. Nothing is going to change. Nothing is going to change under this government, full stop. I can guarantee that.
So we've got 4 more years of that, is it?
Probably.
Yeah.
Probably. Unless there's such a dire crisis that even Labour MPs decide to vote the government out. But I don't think that's very likely. I think they've got enough buffer. There's over 400 of them. They've got enough buffer. But not only do we need a new set of MPs voted in, those MPs have to be prepared to reverse what is 40 or 50 years of law. That's how serious the situation is. They essentially have to reverse most of the major laws passed for the last 40 or 50 years.
So what are what is like the main law or one of the main laws they have to
So
reverse?
one is the Human Rights Act. And this is the act that's being used. So even if an illegal immigrant has committed a crime, they won't be deported because of their human rights. So there's a recent case where a man had actually sexually abused his own children, but he was not deported, and the courts made this decision because of his right to family life. Now, I would have thought you waive your right to family life if you sexually abuse your kids, but he was not deported for that reason. So the Human Rights Act has to go, and we have to leave the European Convention of Human Rights. Both of those things have to happen. But also, the Constitutional Reform Act 2005 has to be reversed, which will help make judges more accountable. So there's 2 separate problems. One is the law is wrong, but the other problem is that judges are now taking decisions that should be in the purview of politicians. And this was Tony Blair. Back in 2005, he created the Supreme Court, which had never existed in Britain before. He also took the power away from the Lord Chancellor to appoint judges.
Okay.
And I think this has been very important in terms of we now see a judiciary that is essentially self-appointed. They're not, the senior judiciary are no longer appointed by somebody in the cabinet. And I think that has broken the accountability in the system. So I think those are the two of the laws that need to be reversed. But, in order to really do it, you need to reverse the Constitutional Reform and Governance Act, which was passed, I think, in 2010 by Gordon Brown, which is the thing that puts the Civil Service Code into law, because I think you actually need to be able to appoint senior civil servants who are willing to willing to enact the policies, like what happens in America. So this is what I'm saying. In order to just fix that problem about immigration and dealing with illegal immigration, I've just mentioned 3 laws that need to be repealed. It's more than that. We could just spend the next hour talking about the laws that need to be repealed.
Do you think there's something inherent to the type of person who wants to become a civil servant that makes them likely to be maybe a bit of a box ticker and not to really think about the controversial issues?
I wouldn't put it like that. I think the civil service was conceived, back in the 19th century. It was the Northcote-Trevelyan report that came up with the idea of an impartial civil service. And the idea was to stop corruption. But what has happened is over time, the civil service and the bureaucracy has accreted more and more power. And now they have either become a blocker to doing things, or they're positively advocating a negative agenda, whether it's Islamism, and there's evidence of that happening in the Home Office, whether it's environmental extremism, whether it's transgender ideology. So I think over time, the institutions have got captured by some of these extreme ideologies as well. I don't think it's about the character of the individuals. I met good civil servants, I met bad civil servants. The problem is they're just not accountable. And if the public can't kick out the people at the election who make the key decisions, then that is not democracy. That's the issue. So it's not a character assassination of any given person. It's saying that we've got a system problem here.
Do we also have, as I think you alluded to a little bit, an infiltration of maybe Islamism? I mean, we had recently somebody talking about blasphemy laws and Keir Starmer just nodding along. We had somebody saying defending first the cousin marriage. And this is the UK. Do we have that? Has there been an infiltration, like in Iran, like in Lebanon?
Well, there definitely is. Ideological. There's an ideological war going on here, and that is being openly pursued by some people, such as the 4 Islamic separatist MPs that were elected at the election. They've been open. They've said we want Sharia law in Britain. We want Israel eradicated. But there has also been a more covert operation of saying to people, you can't really talk about this. If you say that these grooming gangs are primarily Muslim, you will be branded a racist. We don't really want to highlight that. We don't really want to go after these cases. So I think there's a combination of an ideological battle, a fear of being seen as racist. There's also an element of political expediency, of people wanting to get the Muslim vote and being concerned if they are speaking out against these issues. And then there is there's an infiltration of institutions as well. Mm-hmm. So all of these things are true.
Was that ever something that came up in meetings while you were PM? Were there people even from other countries, other prime ministers and things saying like, gosh, you've got a bit of an issue in the UK?
During my time as a minister for 10 years, mm-hmm. and so I was a minister in education and that type of issue, there were concerns about some schools, there were concerns about with what the Home Office was doing. If you remember, there was a big row over the Trojan horse issue. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And, we worked very hard to push back against any schools where we thought that type of infiltration was going on or that miseducation was going on. I then went to work in a bunch of jobs that had nothing to do with it, frankly. So Chief Secretary of the Treasury, Trade, Foreign Affairs, and you just naturally spend your time talking about quotas of beef or right. what the rules are going to be on products of origin. So you're not and I think this is the other thing about government is partly because the system is so difficult to navigate. If you're in a ministerial job, you have to spend 100% of your time playing a game of whack-a-mole to get the stuff you're trying to do through. You don't really have the broader vision of what's going on elsewhere. But I remember when the documentary came out on the BBC, Three Girls, and being absolutely shocked about what was happening with the grooming gangs. I think it was in Rotherham, and there'd been no awareness across. Just as a regular cabinet minister, we'd not been talking about it. We didn't know about it. It was not discussed. And at the time, I thought this issue's being dealt with. This has now been exposed. These people are being brought to justice. We saw prosecutions taking place. But I always felt that it wasn't just the perpetrators who need to be brought to justice. It was the councils who had been complicit. It was the police officers who hadn't done enough. And it was even clear then that they hadn't done enough. And so it was something that I always felt there needed to be more to be done. I was shocked when this year attention was brought again to the issue and the fact that it was still going on. That's what really shocked me, that even though this whole issue had been exposed back in 2017, 2018, the police forces, the Home Office, the councils still had not just eradicated it. That was shocking.
It's remarkable because
what I'm saying to you is in the senior levels of government, it just wasn't even. And one of the problems we've got in British government is just the lack of information and information sharing. I'd love to have Elon Musk style, raid on the payment systems of each department, because that's just information that doesn't typically go to ministers at the moment.
It's crazy to me that you were Prime Minister and so nobody came to you and said, listen, these...
I wasn't Prime Minister for very long, I point out.
But it was, sure. But even in weeks and weeks, you'd think someone would come to you and say, listen, we've got this grooming stuff going on.
Well, you would have thought that I would have thought that it would have been dealt with back in 2017, 2018, but it certainly did not come across my desk at all.
It's crazy. And then it makes you wonder, because I guess most of us don't know how it all works. It's such a complicated system, the whole
this is part of the problem, and this is why I'm saying that even ministers in the system don't fully understand the whole system. I mean, I have worked in 6 government departments, so I'm quite rare in having seen a lot of it. And the same problems, the lack of transparency, the lack of accountability, the lack of information, I see across the board. So this is a systemic problem with the British state. But a lot of people just think, okay, I was a minister in the Environment Department, that was terrible, but I'm sure the other departments are better. They're not. They're all like that.
I see. It's crazy. And it makes you go, well, who really is in charge? Who really is, there are conspiracy theories, of course, about who really rules the country or the world.